to the Enhancing Apprenticeship Programs through Strategic Workforce Partnerships webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub, a U.S. Department of Labor apprenticeship intermediary designed to be a one-stop solution for recruiting and training skilled workers in supply chain automation. I'm Kelly Middleton Banks, Director of Programs and Initiatives at the National Association of Workforce Boards. We are also a partner with the Supply Chain Automation Hub. I'll be joined later by Angie Barksdale, Chief Operating Officer at West Michigan Works. For today's objectives, we'd like to provide some understanding on how to create a community-based local partnership that meets the local employer and workforce development needs. We'd also like to provide insights into effective collaboration between apprenticeship sponsors and workforce development boards. In addition, we hope to provide some understanding of the broad scope of strategies and tools that both hub sponsors and workforce development boards can use to expand registered apprenticeship programs. And last but not least, we look to provide some resources and key takeaways to aid in the expansion and support of apprenticeship programs. The agenda for this webinar will start off with setting the stage, providing some understanding of shared goals and the current apprenticeship landscape, highlighting demand, diversity, and some of the technological advancements. We'll then move into strategic workforce partnerships, where you'll hear from Angie Barksdale, lessons from West Michigan Works, and the role of workforce development boards in expanding apprenticeship, including funding strategies and policy implementation. We'll then move into an in-depth insight with a fireside chat with Angie, exploring some deeper insights into effective apprenticeship programs with a focus on collaborative strategies and some key takeaways for sustainable growth. Last but not least, we'll provide an overview of some available resources for apprenticeship support and some essential contact details for further engagement and information. With setting the stage, we want to provide just a brief overview of the current landscape of apprenticeships, understanding some of the importance of collective efforts in fostering apprenticeship programs, and while doing that, recognizing diverse but complementary roles of union, employers, education, and workforce development boards, all stakeholders in the apprenticeship ecosystem. So when you're looking at the apprenticeship landscape, and you all are probably very familiar with this, there's a rising demand and increased need for skilled labor across a variety of industries, your industry being one, with supply chain and automation. There's also an increase in the policy support through incentives for apprenticeship using major legislation like creating helpful incentives to produce Semiconductors Act, also known as CHIPS, the Infrastructure Act, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as IRA, as well as the House Senate is in the process of drafting more apprenticeship legislation. And all of these help inform and provide incentives for the expansion and development of apprenticeship programs. In addition to more policy efforts and investments, there's a growing emphasis on diversifying apprenticeship opportunities to include underrepresented populations. I'd like for you all, when you get a chance, to check out the WTIA's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Center of Excellence. They have a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Insights report from the last year, 2023-2024, that may provide some additional insights on apprenticeship and diversity and inclusion. Last but not least, there's been an adoption of new technologies requiring specialized training programs integrated in apprenticeship curricula to ensure that apprentices are moving forward and being prepared for the future of work. All of these items are really providing a foundation of where we are with apprenticeship and the opportunities for where we can go. So when you're thinking about your apprenticeship ecosystem, many of you are already supporting apprentices. You're looking at how do you synergize the roles of different players in the ecosystem to really support apprenticeship success. What you're looking at on this slide and the next slide will be several models of what that partnership can look like. As a business, if you're the sponsor of the program, you may be providing the on-the-job training, delivering related instruction. Your workforce system in this role could recruit and screen apprentices, while your community colleges develop curriculum for related instruction. If you're an entity or a collaborative or consortium of multiple businesses where you're providing functioning as the sponsor, your workforce system could contribute training funds for related instruction, while your career technical delivers related instruction and your community-based organization provides services, supportive services to your apprentices. For some of you, you may be an industry association where you're sponsoring the program, and your multiple businesses with underneath your association are providing on-the-job training. The community college may be delivering the related instruction. You may have a pipeline that is starting in your K through 12 where they're providing pre-apprenticeship, and your workforce system could help contribute to some of those funds for on-the-job training. And then you may be a labor organization as the sponsor, where the businesses that you're representing provide the on-the-job training, while the career technical schools helps deliver some of that related instruction. And your workforce system is able to recruit and screen those apprentices while also providing some basic skills training to ensure that your apprentices are able and informed to complete the jobs at hand. These models that I've just reviewed are just a piece or a capsule of how you can synergize the roles of the different key players in the ecosystem to further support and expand your apprenticeship. In each one of those, the workforce system are key integral parts of that effort. And the key entity that really is thriving that is your workforce development boards. So understanding how strategies to expand apprenticeship through workforce collaboration is key in helping to support your overall apprenticeship efforts. And so your workforce boards and the apprenticeship system, community colleges all share the same fundamental goals. They connect workers to economic opportunity while meeting the skills needs of employers in high demand industries. So your workforce development board can support apprentices by providing promotional tools for apprenticeship programs as you're looking to increase apprentices for your program. They can help with your related training instruction, identifying additional educational providers, or helping you to construct what that looks like. They can help coordinate and support your on-the-job training. They can provide some support in connecting for supportive services or funding for that. And they can also help identify apprentices, eligible individuals to go through your apprenticeship programs. Understanding the role of the Workforce Development Board in apprenticeship is key in helping to build that foundational relationship to help support the apprenticeship efforts that you currently have and to expand into new apprenticeship offerings. The strategic partnerships with workforce boards to help facilitate connections with employers, education institutions, apprentices, creating that robust network of opportunities as we talked about in the models of synergizing that success. Workforce boards can help partner to leverage state and federal resources to sponsors to help them develop and scale apprenticeship programs. As an entity in the community, they do have access to a variety of funding sources, and they can work with sponsors to identify opportunities to leverage those fundings for apprenticeship. They're also capable of doing the market alignment. WDB's workforce boards are designed to be experts on the labor market in their local communities. And they can help align apprenticeship programs with the labor market needs, ensuring that the training meets current job demand. There's also an opportunity to help with policy implementation and to ensure that the programs comply with the local, state, and federal regulatory standards. Last but not least, the workforce boards can also play a pivotal role in maintaining the quality of apprenticeship programs, supporting some of the oversight and continuous improvement frameworks. Workforce development boards not only can be a supporting character in the work that you all are doing, but they at times can also function as the sponsor for those employers or partners who may not be ready to make the commitment, but are looking to expand into apprenticeship. In addition to some of the strategic ways in which workforce boards can support apprenticeship, there's also an opportunity on how the workforce system can support some of the funding. Workforce boards in some instances can help support pieces of apprenticeship through on-the-job training or OJTs, where there's OJT contracts that can cover, multiple apprentices. And in most states, that potential OJT reimbursement under WIOA has been increased from 50% to 75%. Under WIOA, they can also support the related training and instruction funding some of the classroom training through individual training accounts, ITAs, and that can allow for program participants to or the registered apprenticeship programs to also be on the ETPL list, which is the eligible training provider list. And this also allows for cohort training. ITAs can cover those groups of individuals that you have moving through the apprenticeship process. Workforce boards could also help support through WIOA's supportive services for your apprentices, such as childcare, transportation, and that can help make or break the opportunity for your apprentices to be successful in their apprenticeship program. These are all things that may be available to sponsors of apprenticeship programs. And some of that is dependent on the Workforce Development Board's local areas. And so it's important to develop a relationship with your Workforce Development Board to understand what available resources, be it funding or other strategic ways, that they can further help you expand and support your current apprentices or new apprentices. We'll be holding another webinar in the near future that goes a deeper dive into the different funding streams, as well as different funding resources to support and expand your apprenticeship programs. Now would like to go to strategic workforce partnerships, lessons learned from the field. And I'd like to turn it over to Angie Barksdale of West Michigan Works. Angie is the Chief Operating Officer at West Michigan Works, covering 7 counties in Western Michigan. She's a longstanding experience in workforce development, supporting a variety of initiatives, and apprenticeship being a key integral part of the West Michigan's workforce development strategy.
Thank you, Kelly. Glad to be with all of you today. As we begin the presentation, I think it's important for us to first level set and have some understanding about local workforce boards and their roles and responsibilities before we discuss how one might partner with them in your apprenticeship work. So local workforce boards in the United States are structured in accordance with the requirements of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA or WIOA. WIOA outlines the composition and the functions of the boards and ensures that they effectively carry out workforce development activities in their respective regions. Here's an overview of a typical structure of a workforce board. There is the workforce board itself, which is required to be comprised of 51% private sector business. There's also requirements for union representation, training representation, youth program representation, adult education, economic development, and vocational rehab, along with other local requirements. Along with the workforce board, there's also a requirement for the designation of a chief elected official. That chief elected official or local unit of government has responsibilities in the carrying out of the work of the board and WIOA. There's, of course, bylaws and procedures and appointment processes. The local workforce development board is required for planning, oversight, accountability, funding allocation, public engagement, and reporting. There's also the availability of a variety of funding sources. Some local boards may secure additional grants and resources to support specific programs and populations, while other boards rely primarily on federal WIOA funds, which is the common thread amongst us all. Local workforce boards prioritize services and delivery based on the unique needs and priorities of the region, as well as the guidelines outlined in WIOA. Here are the key steps and factors involved in how a workforce board prioritizes their service delivery. Under WIOA, a board is required to conduct a comprehensive need assessment, develop a local plan, set priorities, set allocation of resources, comply with all the WIOA regulations, and engage the community. It's important to note that the specific priorities and strategies for a workforce board can vary significantly from one region to the next, depending on the local labor market, economic development conditions, and community needs. As a result, the process of prioritizing service delivery is tailored to those specific circumstances. Overall, boards play a critical role in aligning workforce development efforts with the needs of their local communities and industries. Their structure and functions are designed to foster collaboration among key stakeholders and promote the effective delivery of workforce services and programs. So WIOA has a lot more involved than just being a funding source for training. So how are services typically delivered? Local boards operate differently based on their unique needs, priorities, and economic conditions. The specific programs and service offered by a local board can vary differently, as we just discussed. While core services are consistent across the country, some boards may develop unique programs and initiatives tailored to their specific region. While they all adhere to the overarching principles and guidelines set forth in WIOA, there are several ways in which local workforce boards can vary their operations. For example, one board may target specific industries and occupations, while another board may not. Demographic focus may be a priority for a board. Economic and labor market conditions can adjust the service delivery, as well as the partnerships and collaborations that are unique to the board's region. Other examples are service delivery models. Some boards, for example, may operate one-stop career centers and employ all of the staff providing the services, while others may use a network of partners and organizations to provide their services. Specific programs and services by the boards, again, as we discussed, may be different. Core services are usually consistent across the country, but boards may develop unique programs tailored to their region's needs. And as discussed before, the availability of funding and resources can vary very greatly from one board to the next. In summary, local workforce boards have the flexibility to tailor their operations and programs to best meet the needs of their local communities. The flexibility allows them to respond effectively to unique challenges and opportunities. As the result, the way the local workforce boards operate varies differently from one region to the next. So let's talk about a couple examples of how this plays out and why this is important to understand when working with your local workforce board. I'm going to use my state as an example. As you can see by the map, we have 16 workforce boards covering the entire state of Michigan. We are all uniformly branded as a Michigan Works, but we are all independent and separate organizations operating distinct to our region. So let's look at Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation over on the east side of the state. They are a workforce board that covers only the city of Detroit. They are a 501c3 who partners very closely with the city of Detroit. That's because their chief elected official is the mayor of the city. So their workforce board strategy and alignment closely ties with the work of the city of Detroit and the mayor's workforce development initiatives. Oakland County, Michigan Works, close to the city of Detroit, covers the entire county of Oakland. They are a department of the county. They report directly to the county administrator and the county board. So their work is tied closely to the county's initiatives and what they're doing in terms of economic development and workforce development for their region. The Upper Peninsula is one workforce board. So imagine serving a rural demographic area that covers that much geography with a limited amount of resources. So their service delivery model and priorities and initiatives vary greatly than what you see in the city of Detroit or Oakland County. Then moving on to my local home region, letter F on the map, West Michigan Works. We cover 7 counties surrounding the greater Grand Rapids area. We have rural counties and we have urban communities like Grand Rapids and Muskegon. We have 14 chief elected officials that partner with our workforce board. Those represent our 7 counties and the city of Grand Rapids. The strategy for our work is much different than our friends on the east side of the state. Another differing factor is we provide all of our services directly, meaning all the staff providing programs in our workforce development area work directly for our organization. Whereas in Oakland County and the city of Detroit, they work with a network of partners where they contract out their services to be deployed in each of their communities. So very different service delivery models based on our local structures and the needs in our communities. So I felt it is important to set the context of understanding that why boards are so different and how you approach them in partnership may depend on how their structure is for their region. So let's talk a little bit about our work, West Michigan Works, in the space of apprenticeships. Our journey began in 2014, 2015, primarily driven by the work of our industry councils. To date, we have 5 industry councils that are uniquely branded that we support and staff with a full-time staff person. In 2014, 2015, we only had established 2 of the 5, Discover Manufacturing and West Michigan Health Careers. These councils are employer-driven and focus specifically on talent pipeline pain points within their industries. We focus on these 5 industries because that's what the data tells us. These are the most in-demand industries in our 7-county region. So our journey into apprenticeship started with conversations specifically with our healthcare partners. A couple of our large healthcare organizations were both having issues with the occupation of medical assistants, and came to the realization in conversations that we were having with them that they were just stealing each other's talent. So in order to help address the bigger picture issue of a pipeline of medical assistants for many healthcare organizations in our region, we began to bring those partners to the table to have conversations on how we might think more strategically and long-term to help the system in the region, not just one individual employer. The conversation went into the space of apprenticeships, which was unique in that at that time, medical assistant apprenticeships were not actively being engaged across the country. So we embarked in these conversations, not only with our healthcare facilities, but our local community colleges. We have 3 in our 7-county region that we partner with. With that, we embarked in deploying our first ever registered apprenticeship program that we held the sponsors for as a workforce board. And the reason we played that role is because we worked to align the needs of multiple employers around one particular occupation. They all agreed to sign on to the same standards. We then worked with our community colleges who all 3 aligned their training programs to provide the technical training for that one standard program that we registered with Department of Labor. We now run that program in cohort fashion, recruiting candidates on a semester basis based on the number of openings the employers who are signed on have at that period. So from there, we've expanded our work in multiple areas within the apprenticeship space. Working with our industry councils, we have registered several other cohort-based programs, but we also work closely with our partners and employers and our training and union organizations within our region to assist them in promoting the apprenticeship programs that they hold, as well as helping to recruit candidates. So in our region, we really view ourselves, the workforce board, as really a neutral convener. There's multiple stakeholders and partners involved in the successful deployment of our apprenticeship programs, and we only play one part of that. We need all of the other partners at the table to work collectively to make the program successful. Where we see ourselves as the workforce board filling a role is assisting, for example, in process improvements and improved structure to better meet the demand. As we discussed, all workforce boards work with federal funded programs, WIOA, for example. So most boards are well versed in dealing with Department of Labor regulations and paperwork. We also have close ties to the Department of Labor, so acting as a liaison, if needed, is a role we've played. We've helped to simplify the registered apprenticeship program, lessen the paperwork. We provide assistance in recruitment. We provide flexibility, programming that we locally control with the employer in the seat or us in the seat, depending on who is sponsoring the program. Collaboration with industry employers as a member of the Registered Apprenticeship Industry Committee. We also have access to programs at the high school. One of the roles our industry councils play is connecting to the K-12 system in providing career exploration and highlighting occupations within their industries. And workforce boards, as we all know, and part of this conversation, can provide potential for access to funding. So a little bit more about the work we have done here in West Michigan. Here's a list of the programs that we hold the sponsorship for. So in most of the cases, multiple employers are signed on to utilize these sponsored programs. Our niche really is working with those small to mid-sized companies who don't have the capacity to hold their own standards. Most of the work, or a lot of the work, has expanded into the non-traditional fields of healthcare, IT. We are also working actively right now on expanding this work into our agribusiness industry, which will broaden our scope as well. So a little bit about the data. This is our current active registered apprenticeships this calendar year in our programs. As you can see, we have about 130 active apprentices participating with 75 different employers across the 4 industries we currently hold standards within. You can see some of the outcome data. We're excited about this work, but what is also important to point out, which is not on this slide, is when we look at the number of individuals enrolled in some of the programs and funding sources we operate as a workforce board, that number is over 540 participants that we help support. So you can see that our work in apprenticeships as a local workforce board isn't limited to the programs we hold the standards for, but also we work collectively with our local employers and our union facilities who hold their own standards. So ways we help support those programs are things like recruitment. There are potential for us to help pay for the classroom training portion of the apprenticeship program. There is opportunities for us to potentially help with on-the-job training portions of the apprenticeship program. We may only help in providing some support services. Again, all of it depends on the particular funding sources we may have available, the eligibility of the participant or the employee who is going into the program, and the apprenticeship program itself and how that program is set up to align with the requirements of the different funding streams. So in closing, the key I want to express in working with your local workforce board is it's all about relationships and finding out what exactly are the priorities and initiatives for the local workforce board in your region. Knocking on the door and just saying, hey, can you help fund my program, is not an entry point to work with that board. As we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, a workforce board has a variety of other requirements and duties that under the WIOA program, along with all of the other work that they're doing. So finding where there are collective points of communication and collaboration where that's mutually beneficial for both of you is a place to start the conversation. Be curious, ask questions. Don't make assumptions about what the board should and shouldn't do. I look forward to having further conversations. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Now we'd like to move into in-depth insights with Angie Barksdale, where we'll talk a little bit about collaborative strategies and some key takeaways for sustainable growth. So again, we're here with Angie Barksdale of West Michigan Works, and wanted to have a follow-up conversation with you about some of the items that you talked about, and hopefully provide some more insight to the hub sponsors that are listening to this webinar. So our first question I have for you is, who should sponsors reach out to at their local workforce development board to build a relationship to support their workforce efforts and apprenticeship programs?
I think there's a couple places to start. If your local workforce development board has a business services or a business solutions division, that's a great place to start having a conversation about where there might be some partnerships and leveraging collaboration opportunities. If the local workforce development board doesn't have a business solutions or a business services wing, I think starting with the director or the CEO of the workforce board to really begin to broach the subject of where is there an opportunity for us to leverage each other's strengths and programs to better service the community.
Awesome. And that's really helpful because I think a lot of times folks are trying to figure out where their entry point is. So thank you for that. The next question I have for you is, and you touched a little bit on this as you were rounding out your presentation. What is the misconception about partnering with workforce development boards for apprenticeship that you have encountered?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions and the challenge is that we're viewed as just a funding source, that a partner, a training provider, a sponsor will knock on our door and say, hey, I want some WIOA money to pay for our apprentices. Well, we would love to be able to fund all of the apprentices out there, but I think it's important to realize that the Workforce Board has a tremendous amount of responsibility in deploying the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funds. They're not just an open checkbook. We're held to performance measures and outcome measures that are really geared toward that individual that's being trained and helping them follow their career path and exiting to employment. So I think it's important to enter any partnership understanding that the person on the other side of the table has their own outcomes and goals that they're looking to meet and achieve, and figuring out then where we can mutually come together to get to where you need to be at the end of the day.
Thank you for that, and you nailed a point I think that we see a lot in the system, but there's so much opportunity for partnership between apprenticeship sponsors and employers and unions, community colleges, to really leverage workforce boards. And so, speaking of partnerships, how do you measure success of partnerships with your apprenticeship programs? What do you look for in understanding if those partnerships have been successful?
Yeah. And it's not always the outputs or the data that shows a successful partnership, right? It's where both of us walk away going, "Oh, that made a difference. We moved the needle on something." Or, "Hey, now let's try something new because that little bit of collaboration was successful." And success can be measured in a variety of ways. That's really about what you're trying to achieve, what your community makeup looks like, what everybody's trying to get out of that partnership. So I think there's not one easy answer to that. But when the day is done, all of us usually in this space are looking to help employers get the talent they need and helping job seekers get into successful self-sustaining employment, right? So if we're doing either one or both of those things, we're helping move the needle in our community, and that really is success in our book.
Thank you. Um, you talked a little bit about this in establishing those partnerships and the importance of communication. What have been some effective communication practices that you've implemented or the organization to build and sustain apprenticeship?
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot in our journey with our industry councils and how to structure them and how to make sure that we stick on task and move the agenda forward. If we're not careful, a lot of times employers' voices get drowned out of the
Mm.
conversation. You know, all there's so many of us who great organizations who have our own mission and vision and focus, right? And it's easy to forget that really the primary customer, the end goal is to meet the need of the employer at the end of the day so that they'll hire the job seeker that we've worked so hard to train. Um, and so we need to be able to keep that and that conversation and that voice in the forefront of our conversation. And I think not to be afraid to disagree, right? In
Mm.
conversations, we have this relationship. We've got some very great, strong relationships with our community colleges, and we like to equate it to like a family relationship. You don't always get along at the dinner table. You don't always agree, but you know what? You sometimes need to say, okay, fine, we'll move forward doing it this way and see how it goes. Or I don't have to take credit this time. You can take credit. We're all in this together, right? I mean, that seems simple. It's not hard or it's not easy. As I say to my staff all the time, true collaboration, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And they don't because it's hard. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort.
And there's a lot of collaboration around your apprenticeship work, and West Michigan Works is an interesting entity in the ecosystem because not only are you supporting employers with apprenticeship programs that they may sponsor, you all are also a sponsor of apprenticeship programs, which you touched on in your PowerPoint. Um, so you can relate to some of the listeners to this webinar. So would love to hear any challenges that you all faced as an apprenticeship sponsor and how you overcame them, because I think it'd be helpful for those who are also on this journey as well to hear from a colleague on how they've navigated the space.
Mhm, mhm. I think a couple things. One, as you've seen from our list, a lot of our apprenticeships are in the non-traditional space. So overcoming the perception that apprenticeships are only for the manufacturing space. You know, we're in Michigan, right? The automotive capital. So when you hear apprentices, you think tool and die makers, right? in the auto industry. So helping our community and the public, especially job seekers, as well as employers, understand that this is an avenue that they can take to help broaden their talent pipeline that's outside of the traditional space, I think is one of the challenges. I think another challenge is it's federally regulated, right? And we are a system that is solely focused on deploying federal programs and state programs. We're well versed in the requirements and the paperwork and all of the things that need to be done to be compliant. As an employer, you may not be familiar with that, nor do you have the interest or the capacity to go down that space. So partnering sometimes with your local workforce board who is experienced in administering and dealing with all of the regulations that come with federal dollars and grants is another place. So that has been a challenge, I think, for our local employers as they enter the apprenticeship space and want to work at not just becoming DOL certified, but then the whole avenue of tapping into the grants and the funding resources that may be available. That's a whole nother world that most employers are not familiar with and can be very overwhelming.
And thank you so much for that, because I think as sponsors there's a variety of different pieces that you all are responsible for, and so knowing that you can leverage your workforce boards to help support some of that, and as well you all being a sponsor, understanding some of the challenges that other sponsors face. It's always good to hear how you overcome that and how you've been working through those pieces. So the last question, well, actually, two more questions. One question is, what resources did you find helpful as you engage and support employers in advancing apprenticeship?
I think I wouldn't say it's a particular resource, but I think a particular attitude is to be curious and ask questions and ask, but why not? Or how can we? Or what about? Or what if? Don't just make the assumption that this doesn't fit in a box, so we can't do it. Right. Our first journey into apprenticeships, as mentioned in my presentation, was our medical assistant registered apprenticeship program. It was very unique and was not a journey that even DOL had embarked on nationally at the time, right? So it was challenging all kinds of assumptions. So it's to not be afraid to try something a little bit new and go, okay, well, did that work? Did it not work? How do we adjust? What did we learn? How can we do it better? Because I think that's what moves the needle to make an impact in the community.
And my last question, what are three pieces of advice you would give sponsors who are looking to sustain and expand their apprenticeship programs?
Mhm. I think one is be open to different collaborations and partnerships. Be willing to understand that all of us have our charge, right? Like when the day is done, I have to report certain outcomes and measures to my board. My community college has to report certain outcomes and measures to their board. The HR director I'm working with at the employer needs to report X number of hires in this last quarter. We all have our benchmarks we need to hit, but if we can collectively come together and say, how do we help each other create something that will get us all a win? I think that's where the true collaboration happens. I think being open to new ideas. I think don't enter any of the conversation with an assumption. For example, go in assuming your workforce board has money to pay for the training or an OJT or the support service. They may not. Our resources are always being stretched to the limit and everybody wants a piece, right? But there's a lot of things that a workforce board can bring to the table. As we talked about at the beginning of my presentation, what does the labor market look like? What's the career outlook look like? We're charged under WIOA to be looking at those things. Can we help with recruitment and promotion versus just funding certain things, right? But that needs to be an open, fluid conversation as things adjust and move along in our communities and in our labor market.
Well, thank you so much, Angie, for your insight and in-depth discussion around how West Michigan Works has been engaging in apprenticeship. I think this information will hopefully help others in sustaining and expanding their apprenticeship efforts.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.
Some key takeaways from Angie's presentation, our conversation, and some of the points before. Strengthening our apprenticeship programs, it takes a coordinated effort between all members of the ecosystem and partners to be able to really strengthen and expand your apprenticeship programs. So you want to think about the strategic contacts and identifying the right points of contacts within your workforce development board. That can really help streamline the initiation and the maintenance of a fruitful partnership with your local workforce development board. You also want to demystify some of the thinking around what a partnership could look like. Partnerships with workforce boards are often misunderstood, so clarity about their role and the benefits can lead to more effective collaborations. You also want to think about how you can anticipate challenges and be proactive in your problem solving to hopefully resolve any challenges and leverage shared resources and objectives as you establish your partnerships with local workforce development boards. You want to create an open line of communication and maintain continuous communication channels with a continuous feedback loop to ensure the mutual understanding and alignment of goals are present in order to meet the expectations and outcomes of your apprenticeship programs. When thinking on how to leverage your workforce board resources, there's resources, network, training opportunities provided by workforce development boards to really enhance your apprenticeship programs and provide more value to your apprentices. So as you're entering into these relationships and these partnerships, really think about how to expand your partnership beyond sometimes just those funding elements. When you're establishing these partnerships, you also want to think about that these initiatives are built and offer mutual benefits, not only for you as a sponsor, but also as for the workforce development boards, so that your strategic interests are aligned and both parties can meet their ultimate goals. You also want to think about long-term sustainability through your collaboration with your workforce boards. And what does that look like for each individual entity and your partners, as well as for the overall apprenticeship program and your apprentices? You want to achieve that sustainability through shared vision and ongoing dialogue with your local workforce development board. And you want to be innovative and you want to adapt. I think, for the last several years of finding our ways to adapt and change and innovate with uh, the new world that we are now entering in. And so you want to be able to be prepared to adapt to the industry changes. And you want to ensure that your partnership reflects that. Workforce development boards are continuously on the front lines of designing and developing and advancing workforce development in local communities. And they're a great partner to think through how and in which ways that you all can adapt and innovate your apprenticeship programs to meet your current needs, but also your future needs, and ensure that your apprentices are ready for the future of work. And you also want to think about the policy components, as I pointed out earlier. There are new investments and legislation that is happening at the federal level that's impacting the interest and expansion of apprenticeship programs. So you want to work with your workforce development boards to shape a favorable environment for apprenticeships and for workforce development. There are a lot of interest today in youth, adults, uh, diverse populations, really leveraging apprenticeship. So how do you play a role in creating that environment to where apprenticeship continues to be the gold standard in work-based learning? We'd like to provide you with some resources that will hopefully continue to help you on your journey with expanding and supporting your apprenticeship programs. Career One Stop is a great resource for the workforce ecosystem. Here's where you can find your local workforce development board. If there's any interest in reaching out to your local workforce development board, feel free to contact me and I'll gladly assist you in making that connection. In addition to Career One Stop, Workforce GPS is a great resource with multiple communities and resources to support the advancement of workforce development ecosystem. And they have specific resources for apprenticeship. So we included one of the pages that they've curated several apprenticeship resources. The Registered Apprenticeship Technical Assistance Center of Excellence for Strategic Partnerships and System Alignment is one of several of the Centers of Excellence sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor. The Systems Alignment and Strategic Partnerships Center of Excellence is focused on helping the ecosystem of apprenticeship programs, of apprenticeship partners, workforce development boards, community colleges, industry, to align their efforts to better support and expand apprenticeship programs. If you're interested in also to identifying some of the other centers of excellence for registered apprenticeship programs, we've also included that information as well. Last but not least, a website that you all are probably very familiar with is apprenticeship.gov, which is the one-stop source to connect career seekers, employers, and education partners with apprenticeship resources, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor. And it has a list out of great resources to help support you in your efforts. Again, I'm Kelly Middleton Banks, Director of Programs and Initiatives. I've included my contact information on this slide. I'd like to thank Angie Barksdale, Chief Operating Officer of West Michigan Works, for joining me today, not only providing great insights on the work and great work they've done in West Michigan Works, but also providing some additional insight on how other sponsors and individual and organizations supporting apprenticeship can continue to sustain their efforts and partner with workforce development boards. As a partner of the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub, please feel free to reach out to the hub if you have any additional needs or technical assistance needs. If you have not had a chance to receive the newsletter from the Supply Chain Automation Hub, by all means, please sign up. The Supply Chain Automation Hub is here for you to continue to help you support and expand your apprenticeship programs with experts in a variety of topic areas and different aspects of the apprenticeship programs, as well as supportive and encouraging staff to help you along your way. Thank you for your time, and we hope that this webinar was helpful to you and provided you with additional support and resources to help you on your journey with your apprenticeship programs.